remember seeing a clip ages ago. I can't remember where it is now. It's a shame because it was an amazing one of somebody firing at someone else, moving up very well, too close to the environment, and the gun turns sideways as he was firing, and he shoots his buddy in the head, which which is some completely random because
That's
yeah, because he pushed
awesome.
up to it and it moved up like this, and he
Yeah.
just flick shotted this guy at 90 degrees to his left hand side, and it's honestly it's hilarious.
Welcome to ScavTalk, an Escape from Tarkov podcast with a continuing focus on development of the game, patch note analysis, theory crafting, and general gameplay discussions. My name is Church. I'm one of your hosts. I am a video editor for a Tarkov YouTuber named Airwing Marine.
I'm GigaBeef, a Tarkov YouTuber helping you guys get better at the game. And welcome back to ScavTalk, everybody. I finally, by the skin of my teeth this week, hit level 40. So that's good. As I said last time, I've been extremely busy IRL, so it's been a
Yep.
little tricky. And I was working towards a weekly to extract from interchange 14 times, which, as you know, for me is pretty bad. And I've done it pretty passively. If I'm honest, I've done it quite passively in a fairly boring way while I've been doing other stuff. So that's that. But I didn't actually even complete it, and just by going and killing scavs and stuff with a
Yeah.
2-1-5, I ended up getting enough XP to get to 40 anyway. So that's been my week really. How's it been going for you?
Well, good. I was spamming interchange like crazy, doing my typical strength training teabag stuff, and I decided, God, when was it? Was it Tuesday or Wednesday? I decided to cut on Steam Audio, because I haven't used it in, God, forever.
Oh, you have it off?
Yes, for like
Ah.
back when, God, when was that? I don't know. I can't even remember, dude. It's been so long, but when it first came out, I had it on, and it took some adjustments to get used to, but generally speaking, I was like okay with it. Then there was an update, and there was like ghost footsteps at the start of the raid.
Yeah.
And my PC was also blue screening, which I thought at the time it was Steam Audio. Turns out it was just Windows update being really bad as per usual. So I had it off, and I never really cut it back on because I didn't want to like relearn it, because I have like this vivid memory, and maybe it's just a like a false memory, like my mind just is not reconstructing the events properly. But I remember having Steam Audio on, and I was like in factory. I peeked a corner, and it sounded like the guy was really far away, I guess, but he was actually a lot closer, or maybe it was the inverse of that, but it was something like this, right? And it really annoyed me because I wasn't used to that, and I don't think that's the case now. I'm not sure because A, like I said, my memory could be wrong. B, they could have had a module enabled for Steam Audio that had that difference in volume for distance. I forget what the technical term is called. I don't know. Anyways, long story short, yeah, I've had it off for the longest time. I turned it on recently, and it was actually like the learning curve was like none. It was like super easy, and it was just like, yeah, this is like way superior. And even with like the audio bugs being like
annoying.
Well, you know they are. I did have the weird air, like compressed air, being like pushed into your. I thought I see. This is crazy because I've heard people talk about this, and I'm just like, huh, I've never had this issue, but that's because I've had Steam Audio off, right? And then now I can be like, oh my god, this is the thing they're talking about. And I was playing with a buddy. He has Steam Audio on, and I asked him, I was like, did you hear that? He was like, yeah. What's that noise? And I was like, I don't know. It's a Steam Audio bug. He was like, really? And he's like, you know what? Now that you mention, I've never really like paid much attention to that type of stuff. He's like, it's just like he's been so like accustomed to it, and in some ways, I feel like the scavs like yelling in your ear and then getting really quiet is almost like a pro because it helps you like localize. It's like, I don't know, it's weird. It's a weird thing. But long story short, I don't know what's been happening, dude. So yeah, cutscene mode has been great, but that same day, I logged in, cut it on, log off, restart the game. I get like profile loading bugs constantly. And it's like, I'll exit a raid. As soon as I exit the raid, I get a error that pops up and is like authentication error, force closing the game, or like client authentication error, closing the game in 30 seconds. And it's like, if that doesn't happen, then either I leave the raid and like the post screen takes 10 minutes to load, and then I leave that and then that
Oh,
takes 10 minutes to load, and then I'm in the hideout. Maybe it's working, maybe it's not. I try to buy off the flea market. Flea market's not loading. Traders aren't loading. Item back-end errors. Like it's not that it's unplayable. It just makes the experience completely unenjoyable and miserable.
yeah.
So I don't know what to do. I've tried turning off Steam audio. That's like, I highly doubt that's the case unless they're like tracking that information. And now that it's got bugged somewhere, I don't know. There could be so many things. It's probably, I'm guessing it's something on BSG side. I don't know. It could be my ISP. It could be my router. I've tried like restarting. I've tried uninstalling the game, reinstalling the game, clearing temp files, clearing cache files. Everything, dude, is just like, I looked up stuff online. People were saying something about Vodafone and changing hardware acceleration or router, but that's like an ISP provider in Germany that people were having issues for. So I have no clue. Other people say they're having issues, but I feel like I got the worst end of it. I have no clue. So if anyone has a solution out there, please share it to me, because it is, I like can't like, dude, I have to launch the game, wait 10 minutes just to collect my hideout, and hopefully the flea market's not bugged. Otherwise, I can only do crafts that are in my stash. Like, it's so miserable, dude. It
Yeah, that
sucks.
really, really sucks.
Yeah,
That
it
really
does.
sucks. Yeah, I mean, I've like heard about other people having like long waits between various points on different things. I've never had any of those myself, so I don't know whether it's a regional thing or not. Whether it's like a US for Europe thing, I'm not actually sure.
So you're not
It's not
having
very, yeah.
any.
No,
Okay, yeah. I don't
no,
know.
I'm not.
I have no clue.
I know other people. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, we'll just see what people say because I guess you need to put it out there and see what other people are having problems with. I guess like other bigger like the streamers in the US would also be having problems too. I guess if it was something related to that. So
Yeah.
I guess it's probably not a wider spread issue, unfortunately. Um, I mean, you were talking about Steam Audio. The only it's the gas of air. What is it like blast of air kind of thing?
Yeah,
I actually
like
only had
compressed
that
air.
like I only had that this week. That was the first time I've
Mhm.
had it, and I've had Steam Audio on forever, and I've never noticed this until very recently, where I was like, "What is that funny sound?" The throwing the audio forwards and then it disappearing off has been happening for a while because I've spoken about it before with you and on here about scavs projecting their voice
Yeah.
and scaring the bejesus out of me before I realized that they're actually 100 meters away or something. But yeah, I did that the weird air thing. That I don't know what the deal is with that. I think it feels more recent to me. It does actually feel more recent to me, so I'm not really sure. But I think, as you said, the projection of sometimes because now I've started noticing it properly. It seems to happen with more things like grenades and people throwing flashbangs and people shooting and all sorts of stuff. So you can kind of locate all sorts of weird things that you
Mhm.
shouldn't be able to know because you suddenly get the audio immediately. You're like, oh, well, there's some people over there because they're
Yeah.
way out of hearing
Right.
distance, really. But now you know precisely where they're at, which is kind of, yeah, it's a strange one. It's definitely a double edged sword. It throws you off a bit, but once you're used to it and you're not taking it back, you're thinking, oh, well, I know what this bug is, but now I know someone's here or there's a scav there or there's something
Right.
happening over in this particular direction, which is, yeah, it's kind of strange. So I don't know, but yeah, the back end stuff, I don't know. Like the flea market today was a little ropey for me, but
Mhm.
other than that, it wasn't too bad. I had to close my game and reopen it once because I was trying to buy something and I was just getting spinning circle. And I left it, went back to the flea about 5 minutes later, spinning circle gone, but I tried to buy something else and then it's just spinning circle. And
Hmm.
I couldn't buy anything and I had to close the game and reopen the game and then it was fine. But that's the only thing that I've had. It's,
Yeah.
yeah,
I don't
not
know.
great. I haven't seen like widespread reports of people, but I haven't really been looking that much either. So hard to know.
See, I wonder if it's like regional, but like extremely regional. Like if the backend servers are like hubs, like let's say there's a Virginia hub and like people within X ping distance or whatever all connect to this that connects to the backend servers and over in Europe somewhere. I don't know. I just that or I tried looking through my logs and I could see a log where it was saying that there was an error with like my client authorizing its like itself. So like I thought maybe it was like a login. I tried changing my password. I don't know. I have to look into it some more. But you said a couple things that reminded me of some other topics, I guess, or whatever, little tidbits.
Yeah.
I had an experience where I was inside German, like the wooden store on Interchange, like right across from Mantis, the little medical unit, and there was like 3 gigachads roll up on me. I'm like, great, I got my little SVD. And anyways, I'm sitting in there, and all of a sudden, I just take damage to the head, arms, and thorax. It was really weird, and I was like, what was that? And then I noticed that they were pulling grenades and throwing them at me. So I think what happened is I got a grenade that went off and like behind me or something, and I took damage, but it made zero sound. And I have never had that experience in a extremely long time. Like I think I've had, man, it's like I want to say I've almost never had that experience. I might be remembering wrong,
Is
but
this with Steam Audio on now?
yes, that's the thing,
Mhm.
right? So I wonder if it's related to Steam Audio. I don't know. That could be one scenario. Scenario two could be all these authentication issues I'm having. It's somehow affecting that. I have no clue. Um, God, there was something else, but it slipped my mind. So yeah, interesting stuff. Interesting stuff.
Yeah, it's a bit strange. Bit
Yeah.
strange at the moment, but it's all good. Yeah, so I think we had a chat quickly before
Yeah.
this cast, and you wanted to discuss some of the like an extension, I suppose, of what we talked about last time about
Hmm.
some of the recoil mechanics, the ones that we were discussing with Abney,
Yeah.
and some of those things. So yeah, I mean, take it away because I think you had
Oh
some topics in particular that you wanted to discuss, right?
God, where to start? So I guess I've just been even more interested in these so-called hidden stats and the inner workings. Some new information came through and I looked into it, and it sort of like shows the inner workings behind the curtain, so to speak, like the Wizard of Oz machine. And it's it's actually really fascinating because I think that I don't know, most games recoil with like iron sights and even like just like more traditional crosshair recoil type mechanics like Counter-Strike. Um to my knowledge, typically follow a 1-to-1 path with the recoil. Like if the in other words, let's say the gun kicks up, like just directly up, your you'll see the gun move, your crosshair will move, and your essentially your camera will also follow that crosshair. You know, it'd be kind of weird if like your camera stood still and your crosshair moved and your gun moved at the same time, right? But your actual
Yeah.
camera, like the center of your screen stood still, but you could see the crosshair going up. Like you could have cases where your crosshair goes off the screen, so to speak. Like wouldn't that be kind of like awkward? So Tarkov works uniquely in that they don't have that linked, I guess you could say. So, for example, um, the stat or the modifier known as like camera recoil, that is that visual screen moving effect. And how they set up their system is almost like a physics system, which is really interesting, where you got to like separate your camera slash screen from your actual gun. So when you shoot the gun is like physically moving in a direction. Um,
Yeah.
we'll say XY axis and the man, this is tough because there's like two different. We'll say XYZ axis, okay? Um, and I guess correct me if I'm wrong, but the Y would be up and down, X would
However you want to
be
define it, but it can be, yeah.
yeah. We'll say
In
Y
this
is up and down, X is left and right, and Z is forward and backwards.
cool.
Okay, so the the gun recoil will go in the Y and X direction, right? It doesn't really move in the Z, which it technically does, but we'll talk about that in a sec. So it's physically moving, but if you had a value of 0 for your camera recoil, your PMC where you're looking at the screen would remain the exact same. So you would literally see the gun move up into like into your face, I guess you could say.
Which is kind of weird, right?
Yes. Now, if you had the camera recoil matching, I guess you could say, the movement of the gun, then it would feel very, mm, I would say natural is the word I would use. And there's different cases where if the camera recoil is too high, right, then, oh, let me see if I'm getting this right. Let's see. If it's too high, then you would actually be looking down into the gun, I guess you could say. So, and the gun would go, it would like exacerbate the first scenario I kind of described. And and if it was too low, then maybe I'm getting it backwards. I don't know. I'm starting to lose track of everything. So let me try to reel it back in. That's camera recoil. Let me tackle the Z axis, the forward backwards. So um the Z axis is essentially the horizontal stat that you see in the weapons modding screen, which is really odd, but
It is really odd. It is really odd. Yeah,
really
because
odd.
you mentioned this to me before, and it's just I don't. Yeah, it's very strange.
And essentially, what that means is it's let's say you have a horizontal stat of like 500 within the weapons modding screen. It's going to kick backwards on that Z axis, like towards your shoulder more aggressively, which for all intents and purposes is just a visual effect. It does nothing in terms of how the gun actually performs or where your bullets go. So that's really interesting. But the other stat within the modding screen, the horizontal recoil, is the y-axis, it going up, right?
Very
And
vertical.
yes, yes. And man, this is like so cumbersome. I don't know, because now there's another stat that's affecting it, and that's the angle, which is the hidden stat. And there's essentially a base, or like I guess like a base angle, and on most guns it's 90, which would be straight up. But there's also this modifier that's a certain degrees, like let's say it's 15 degrees. So if the base is 90 and the modifier is 15, then it can vary between 105 degrees and am I doing this right? 175? No, 185 degrees. So kind of like a very tight V, I guess you could say. You're picturing this like angle, right?
Is it kind of
And
like 15 either side? Is that kind of
yes,
the idea?
exactly. 15 left or right. Yeah. And there's, which is interesting because some guns have a base like the PPSH, which we've talked about this before a little bit, has a base of like 110 or something. So it
Mm.
goes, I think it goes to the, yeah, it goes to the right, like naturally, but also can deviate either straight or like extremely, like straight
Yeah, because
up.
I've noticed this before, especially using the
Yes.
drum. It like pulls hard off to one side. I can't remember actually
Yes.
which way it is, but yeah, it pulls off hard to one side and then stays there, which is really strange.
Mm-hmm.
It feels weird to use that way.
Yeah. Um, so that's how that works. But the actual that would be the angle, and then the like the base angle, and then the angle modifier, I guess you could say. And then there's tying it back to the recoil of the gun in the mind screen. It's basically how high it jumps. So if it's like 1,000, it's going to kick in that those directions very aggressively, right? Then there's the other stat, which is hidden, and that is the auto recoil control stat that each gun has. I guess it's like a modifier. I'm not sure how it plays into
This is the one
skills.
we were touching on last time, right? I think this is the one that we were speaking about with Abney.
Yes, a bit, yes. And this stat's actually omega important. Like it's probably the most important, like yeah, I would say the most important stat because oh god, it's like a 25% difference between two similarly performing guns, like recoil or sorry, rate of fire, we'll say. Like the MPX and the HK, for example. Man, let me just pull up the sheet and see if I can find a decent example. That's not too
I think because the Scar is that's why the Scar's so good, right? It's one of the best ones for
yes.
this.
Yes, it is. Oh, okay. Let me find like a better. Anyways, whatever. Oh, okay. Actually, you know what? The AK, the AK. Where's AKM? AKM. Okay, AKM and the mutant, right? So they have like pretty close fire rate, 50 difference, but the AK has a 1.2 auto recoil control modifier, and the mutant has a 2 uh, auto recoil control modifier. So that's like what, a 60%? No, 40% difference, something like this.
So, yeah, I mean it's a lot. It's a lot. It's actually it's like what 60. It's 66.6%. I think.
Yeah,
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 from
yeah, yeah.
1.2 because you need an extra. You need an 0.8 to get there, which is like 2/3. But yeah, I guess that's kind of wild because like we know a bit more about this stat now, which is it's the rate of coming back to the center, right? And
Yes.
so the higher the number, the quicker the rate is of returning to center. So you fire with both guns at the same recoil, the mutant will return back to the center faster. And I think the ramifications of that are if you fire subsequent shots, because you have how do you put it exactly? Because you have the weapon returning to the center quicker with the mutant, for example, that means that the overall resulting point at which the recoil flattens out is much lower than on something like the AKM, because the AKM has to be going for more before it
Yes.
starts to counteract the recoil from the full auto fire. So
Yeah.
that's why the mutant ends up being super good, and why also the Sky ends up being super good, because they counteract that quite quickly, as well as just having a faster return in general.
And even though the AKM can get lower vertical recoil within the modding screen than the mutant, that because of that difference in the auto recoil control stat just makes the MK better um, by a pretty significant amount. I don't know like what's like the sweet spot, what's the percentage differences that it really comes into play, but
Yeah.
and I have an analogy to sort of explain that phenomenon that you're describing, and it's like I think of it like this: like let's say you got a pipe, and on one end you have pressure pushing a piston or something. I don't know. And that's sort of like the constant pressure pushing it upwards. And we'll say that is the recoil. Okay, so every time the bullet fires, it's just like a flat 25 psi upwards. Whereas on the top end, or on the other side, I guess you could say, you have the auto recoil control stat. And every time it fires, instead of applying a flat 25 psi, it's going to apply that 25, the opposite pressure over time, but similarly each time it fires. So what sort of happens is the more you fire, right, you got this constant, pressure on one side. That's just like a flat value. Then you have sort of like this trickling pressure where like it sort of like increases over time. The more you fire, the that trickling pressure can sort of like become a greater force than the constant pressure, if that makes any
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
And it can like vary based off, is the recoil, vertical recoil really high, and then the auto recoil control stat really low, then it really wouldn't work out that well, but it would still have an effect, but just not as good. Whereas if you have the inverse, it's just like super obvious, like the scar, for example. And I think that this stat alone is just like completely defined the meta this wipe because the guns that are most talked about, most complained about is like the mutant, the ump, and I would throw in like the RSS, the Scar even, because these have the best or some of the best auto recoil control stats, and it just makes the guns perform extremely well. Like the ump, for example, I wasn't really aware of this till I looked at it recently. It has 2.8, which is second highest. It's only tied with the Vector 9 mil and 45 mil at 3.4. So, and because it shoots slower, I think it sort of like helps level that out. I'm not too
Yeah, that makes
sure.
that even better. Yeah, exactly.
I'm not too sure. I don't know. There's kind of a weird thing. Like I don't know. There's so many things going on because you know what's also probably the case is the camera recoil is kind of high on the ump relative to the other guns in its class, and that probably helps a lot with the recoil because the PP19, is it the PP19? Where's that at? No,
Or the 9 mil fully
Sega
auto.
Sega 9. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Is it the PP91? Is that what it is? Am I thinking of yeah, I think that is the one. It's actually got a really low camera recoil, but it doesn't feel that great to shoot from what I like the early wipe what I remembered. I don't know,
Which kind of makes
man.
sense, right? That kind of makes sense, right? Because like, well, to me, the whole system's kind of is what I sort of alluded to last time, which is it's
It's
the whole
crazy.
system is designed around having enough levers to be able to pull to make the guns feel different and to be able to
Mm,
change the perception and well, yeah, the feel is probably the best way to make the user feel like the weapons are unique or
unique.
special or different or how they do in real life. And it's kind of interesting, even if you just take something very basic, you're talking about camera recoil and about how looking at broad categories of weapons to start with, you have something like an assault rifle, pretty standard, and you have that into your shoulder, and that makes sense. So when you fire, you've got it tucked into your cheek or whatever, however you want to fire it, but you're going to be in that position in some sense. And when you fire, the camera recoil is kind of your head moving with the gun, but your head's kind of connected to the gun, right? So it makes sense for those stats to be aligned in some sense, at least to be quite similar, which is how we see it in game. Whereas something like a pistol, because it's not connected to you in that same way,
Right.
then that's why the pistols end up looking and feeling like they do. Because we said last time that they have extremely high recoil. They also have extremely high convergence. So they come back to the central point very quickly. But that makes sense because of the type of weapon that they are, because they're held in the hand without, if you don't have a stock on or anything.
Hmm.
They're held in the hand, they fire, the pistol shoots up, and then comes back to the central point super quickly. And so the camera recoil, well, the camera itself, never mind the recoil, the camera itself, which is you, is actually disconnected from the firing
Yeah.
mechanism of the weapon, really,
Yeah.
for the most part, anyway. There'll be some, but it's not the same as with a rifle when you're looking and your camera, your eyes in
Yeah.
real life are connected to the weapon in a proper sense as opposed to the
Right.
pistol. So it defines that feeling. And there was something you reminded me of actually, which was last time I was talking about the Vector, which you just mentioned about. It's got super low actual recoil in the vertical and has really high convergence. And I guess probably I'm not sure about the camera recoil, but
It's low.
the actual recoil is very, very low. But the horizontal recoil is wild. And I talked about this last time. And it's really crazy. It's like super, super crazy. And I wasn't sure if this was realistic or not, blah, blah. And Tower actually messaged me afterwards,
I did see that. Yeah.
and which was pretty cool. And he sent me a video, actually. He sent me a video of a real life Vector and said, oh, this actually kind of makes sense. And there was a video of these guys firing it and stuff. And they said, well, they started off playing around with it from the get-go like they would with anything else. And the guy he actually tries to compensate for the recoil on the first spray and ends up
Hmm.
getting it completely wrong because he tries to pull down, but it ends up just firing low with a load of shots first before controlling it. And the second time, he said, well, now I just don't bother trying to fight it at all vertically, just let it do its thing. And it's way better on target. But the problem that they had was that you fire 2 rounds or 3 rounds or something, and that's where it actually works quite well. And the Vector does have a burst mode in the game. Nobody
Yep.
uses it because burst mode is awful in Tarkov because of some of these things that we've talked about. You have the vertical recoil from the first 3 bullets being really bad because they all compound on top of each other before it can compensate for it and pull it back down. But in real life, anyway, on the Vector, this seems to be pretty good because after that, when they were dumping 30-round mags, because of the rate of fire of this thing and trying to control the beast as it's jumping around, because it will still move, even though it's not moving upwards, it's still moving around as it fires. And they said it was almost, I can't remember exactly how they described it, but it's almost some kind of harmonic effect where you're trying to try to control it one way and you maybe overcompensate, it pulls the other way. And they did end up actually having quite a lot of horizontal recoil, even though the vertical recoil was very low. If it wasn't being fired in burst mode, which is kind of interesting because then that matches actually the experience that you get in
Yeah.
game. So I was like, okay, that's fair enough. But the fact that the system works in such a way that you can kind of replicate that, I think, is the reason why it's so complicated in the first place. Because, as you said right at the beginning of this whole conversation, the weapon mechanics work a bit differently in Tarkov than they do in other games. CS, for example, you don't actually shoot even where your crosshair is half the time. Whereas
Yeah.
in EFT, it needs to be a physics system because the bullet fires and lands where the barrel is pointing,
Right.
no matter what.
Right.
So even if your camera recoil was off over here or something, if you're looking
Hmm.
off to the side and you fire, it'll still come out of the
Yeah.
barrel of the weapon regardless of what's going on. And you do see, I remember seeing a clip ages ago. I can't remember where it is now. It's a shame because it was an amazing one of somebody firing at someone else, moving up very well, too close to the environment, and the gun turns sideways as he was firing, and he shoots his buddy in the head, which which is some completely random because
That's
he pushed
awesome.
up to it and it moved up like this, and he
Yeah.
just flick shotted this guy at 90 degrees to his left hand side, and it's honestly it's hilarious. I can't. It's really old now, so I don't know where it's gone. I tried to look for it about a year
That's
ago, and I
awesome.
couldn't find it. So it's probably lost to the mists of time. But the fact that that happens is the way that it's just adds to the way that the system is built. And so having all of these levers, as I said, that you can pull to say, well, we
Hmm.
want this one to go quick up and down but not affect the visual recoil, or we want this one to have low vertical recoil but high horizontal dispersion, or we want this one to make the camera jump a lot because it's a Saiga 12 with a drum on it, and it does actually give you a good old kick if you try to fire this thing, stuff like that. It's interesting, but there are some flaws to it. I think the burst fire thing is still a problem. I think
Yeah.
there's too much recoil to begin with, and I don't know exactly how that gets resolved. But anyway, that's kind of musings that are not really relevant because that's not in the game. I mean, we're talking more about the practicalities of how it is,
What do you mean it's not really in the game?
as in how to fix the burst recoil and semi-auto, not really semi-auto, but the quick burst set of burst shots. How to
Right.
fix that is will be more musings. I'm more interested in what to do about Like, what do we do now about the recoil system that we have, as opposed to musing about how hypothetically to BSG should fix the burst recoil? Because I don't think they're going to. There will be ways, but I don't think they're going to do it.
I don't know.
Personally,
Well, I'll say this. We talked a little bit before we started recording, and one of the findings from this information was that there it wasn't super in depth, but apparently it seems that at the start of this patch, or when this patch came out, the recoil change that they did, this wipe, was, again, this is apparently, I don't know how true it is. Like, maybe it's different from some guns, maybe it's just across the board. I don't know. It seems that across the board, there's sort of a inherent 20% recoil added to all the guns, if that makes sense. Like, it's not showing up in the in-game stats, but across the board, they all got bumped up by 20, which I don't know. I'm kind of surprised that that's the case, but I also wonder how much they played with all these different levers on each gun and such. One of the interesting, throughout this, looking through information and sort of like processing it and taking it in, it's sort of like changed my perspective on camera recoil. And that's, beforehand I was like very anti camera recoil, I guess you could say. But I think that camera recoil is not really the enemy, because you essentially, if it's done just right, right, you can have a scenario where your camera's almost very accurately following the gun, right? And maybe they want to have it where, as you said, the Sega is like got a massive punch to it, so your head's just like bobbing backwards. So they want to like simulate that. That's fine. But there are some guns where, for example, the MPX, that thing is just like, I don't know, it just feels really bad to shoot, and I'm not. I think it's because the convergence, the auto recoil control stat isn't that high, and the camera recoil is too low.
they're also
So
quite low.
what
Yeah.
happens is the actual gun and sight swings way up, where your camera just barely moves, so it feels like it has a lot of recoil, where maybe in reality it doesn't, but because of the camera distance, perspective, and everything, it does. Like, I don't know. It's kind.
I suppose. I'd be interested to see what the MP7 looks like, because I do notice the same thing with that actually, because it pulls up kind of on its own.
Yeah, it does
I'd
have a little
be
bit of
I'd
a kick to
be
it. Yeah,
mm.
the MP7. Um, where is that bad boy? Why can't I find it? I'm missing it. Anyways, oh, there it is. Um, it's a little bit lower, but it has a higher convergence than the MPX. I don't know. It's such an interest. There's so much information here, but let me rewind it back a bit. And I think that camera recoil is actually how they have the whole system set up. I think it makes really good sense, because, as you said, like, your whole explanation, no matter where your camera's looking, that's where your gun's shooting, because it's where you're pointing. Like, I think that's a cool system. I think the auto recoil control, the convergence, is kind of the where the issue lies, because I don't know how the foundation's set up for it. For example, like, how quickly, like, what's the value that accelerates to? You know what I mean? How fast does it accelerate? Like, let's say, okay, let's say the value is 2. How fast does it go from 0 to 2? What's that speed? Is it constant? So if it's like 1 second, let's say the value's 10. We're going from like 0 to 10 in 1 second. That's like really fast, right? And I think that's kind of how the pistols work, because they sort of like have, the guns themselves has high recoil within the mounting screen, but the conversion stat, the auto recoil control stat, is extremely high. So it's got to swing really fast back down to that center point of aim. So I wonder if they could tweak the numbers a bit and have it to where that speed is less, sort of less pronounced, I guess. So you sort of have a more you sort of I don't know, like think of it as like Bloom and CS:GO is kind of how I'm like thinking of it. So, the longer you shoot, the wider your crosshair gets, and then if you let go, then your crosshair sort of like slowly comes back to the center. They had something like that with full auto, for example. As you full auto, just got greater and greater and greater and greater. But then you let go and it like slowly kind of comes back to the center. Like something like that, I think could really incentivize like single fire, burst fire, because as it is now, single fire is actually really good because you can send it at a very fast rate that's essentially like full auto. And the problem with bursting or taking very precise shots is like, yes, you're coming back to that center point of aim, but you're not getting that compounding effect of full auto where that convergence is like so heavily being applied that the gun's basically full autoing in the center of your screen. That's sort of the pattern that we talk about all the time where like the gun goes up and then goes back down. That's that convergence being multiplied per bullet to where it's like seeding the force that's going upwards, it's sort of pushing it back down to the center. So that's sort of my, as you allude to, I think that's where I would like to see some tweaks in the future because yeah, as I don't know how I feel about the recoil as a whole. Like the meta, to me, the meta is just clearly like I was looking at the 308 calibers, and it's like, well, no wonder the SR25 is so popular. It's like the yeah, all the other semi-autos are well, I guess the RFB's pretty good as well, but RFB is also really popular. Like it's just kind of like it's obvious looking at the data why people prefer these guns because it's not because their modding screen stats are good. It's because these hidden stats are actually really good. And people have indirectly felt that through just using the different guns. Like I was testing an M1A that has lower recoil in every category, vertical, horizontal, in the modding screen versus the other guns, but it just bobs and weaves. Like it just feels significantly worse, even though the modding screen tells me it should be better. I don't know. It's a crazy, wild world with this new knowledge. It's just I don't even know. I don't know what to do. Like it's just so weird, so weird.
Yeah, it is a strange one because it's like, you know, people also this stuff's been hidden for so long,
Yeah,
and it's not like super widely known about. I mean, the thing is, if you look for it, you can try and find this stuff, but it
right.
kind of like appears every now and then, here and there. People talking about different stats and whatever, but it's yeah, how to practically take that information, and in some cases it makes sense because people are talking about the same weapons. I've seen a lot more people complaining about the mutant again
Yeah,
in
a
particular
lot
than
of
some of the others. I think there's kind of two ends of the spectrum. There's ones where people are complaining about certain guns because they're super good. I don't think anyone was really complaining about the UMP, but a lot of people were just saying this is really good. It's a very, very good weapon. It's the early wipe king, really. And
mhm.
then the RFB is great because it's so cheap and slugs M80. So I'm actually not sure if the stats matter so much on the RFB personally, because you can. I was looking at the meta versions of it because you can only add the foregrip and a
Yeah,
suppressor, and I think you can only get it to 110. So it's not the best anyway in terms of that. So
mhm.
it can have good stats, but in that particular case, it's kind of frozen out from being super decent. So it just ends up being a great value weapon, which is fine. But then yeah, you get into the SR25s and the M1As, which there it kind of makes a difference because you can get down into like the 40s on recoil if you try, which is kind of nutty. The SR25 is pretty nutty. If you get it down, I can't remember what the lowest recoil is, but it's something in the region of 45-ish. It's like 47 or something, or 40 odd, and it's bonkers. I've been using it a bit recently, and it's pretty good.
Yeah,
But
it's
then
good.
you've got the other end of the spectrum with the Scar, where it was one of those guns people said, "Oh, this is awful," and then after a while, people said, "Actually, no, maybe this is quite good." And I don't think anyone's complained about the Scar because it's 5.56, and clearly, apparently, everybody hates 5.56 now. Yeah? No one sensible should use 5.56. But of the 5.56 weapons, the general
It's yeah.
thought is now, well, the Scar is so much better than the M4, and the MDR is also decent. And yeah, it's down to these stats really. When it comes down to it, it's difficult to make choices without having to go through and test and sort of see what the community's feedback is, because as has been accurately proven, the community's got a pretty good sense overall once people have had a chance to play with everything. And
Mhm.
it does take a bit of time for a community consensus to form. It's taken probably, when did the Scar start becoming popular? About 3 weeks ago, maybe
Yes, and
a
I think
month ago.
part of that is apparently it was changed mid-wipe. Those hidden stats were changed.
Oh,
That
really?
was yeah, I saw some I if I'm recalling correctly, that's what I saw.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, it sort of went undetected because I wanna say I remember using Starter Wipe and it just felt awful, and now it's just yeah. So anyways, yeah, about 3 weeks ago.
Yeah. So it takes the community a while. Well, maybe that comment isn't as valid. I was going to say it takes the community a while, and that would have been about 2 months in from the start. But if it was changed, then fair enough. Then the community is even faster at picking up on this kind of thing, because eventually people will use the weapons and think, man, feels great, because
Mhm.
you can feel the feeling. You can just tell the gun feels good to use or it doesn't feel good to use, and there's a consensus that builds, and people have liked the mutant for a long time, and it feels great, and the recoil stats are really low because people look at the stats first, and then after using it for a while, decide practically whether it actually works or not, because some of them look great on paper, but then end up not being
I'm looking
that
at
great
you,
in practice.
27 recoil MPX my ass. That thing feels
Yeah,
awful to shoot.
exactly. So I don't know. It's a strange one. I mean, I've been looking into something tangentially related myself, which is about revisiting some of the low recoil
Mhm.
or the recoil reducing ammo. I mentioned this to Church a little bit before we started, that I've been exploring a little bit into it, because I think I'm coming to some conclusions myself, but I'm going to put something together properly on it. But I'm not sure if it's quite right to be looking at the reductions as a flat amount. I'm not sure if it's quite correct, because there's some cases, especially when you get down to low levels of recoil, with some of the ones that have um, way higher reductions. Let's say things like the US ammos are the classic case, because
Yeah,
they're the 30s and
30.
35s. When you get down to the meta levels of builds and you use the ammo in those guns, those builds are in the kind of 40 range, and that would imply that the ammo makes the weapon have approximately 5 to 15 recoil. Depends on which gun you're looking at and what you're
Yeah.
using. And it certainly doesn't feel that way. Now, the the problem that I had with this to begin with was that we don't really know practically what the zero recoil looks like. Is there some kind of minimum threshold? Because if there's a fixed amount and then it
It
scales from
gets
there, even
multiplied,
if you
yeah.
got even if you got to zero, then in that scenario there would still be some recoil. So whether it tails off
Oh,
when it gets to the
mhm.
bottom, that was what I was considering at first. However, I was thinking back to an older bug, which is actually quite an interesting data point with the ADAR, whether there was that ADAR bug where the stock was bugged and you could attach the wooden stock, which was also a pistol grip, as well as another stock onto the buffer tube. And in that particular scenario, you could make a negative recoil ADAR, and it was live in the game for about 30 minutes before it got patched out. And people were taking these ADARs into raid, and when they were firing them, they did literally have zero recoil whatsoever. The gun did not move when you fired the weapon, which kind of implies that zero recoil is zero recoil, as opposed to
Mhm.
any kind of minimum or anything like that, which then puts the whole thing into question, because the problem is with the US ammos and the meta builds, you can't do any proper testing because there isn't anything that gets better than the meta build. So you have to use weapons that are not meta, bring them down to the meta build, but then the differences are very tiny because of these changes in vertical recoil and stuff. So I'm doing some experimenting. I'm putting together my thoughts properly, and I think there's something funny going on, which is not addressed fully in the video that I've done. So look forward to that one because I think I'll definitely be making it. But it's interesting nonetheless. I don't the thing about it is I don't think it practically makes much difference. I think for all intents and purposes, you probably can think about it like a negative, just a flat negative, because most of the time I think that's pretty much the case. But it depends. There's some scenarios where I don't think it's
Yeah,
necessarily like that. So
interesting stuff.
yes, yes, indeed, indeed. Any other thoughts about Recoil, hidden stats, anything like that?
I'll just say this, that if you're listening and you're like, oh God, I wanna get in on this secret stuff. I'll just say it's out there if you want to find it. But I don't really want to spread it. This is I don't know. I'm really torn on this because this is like one of those things where historically I'm always like, knowledge is power, information is power. Let's just like share it. But I want to protect the person that did this research, and also historically BSG is or openly said that they don't like metas, and they're sort of like, they got the ban hammer on the, just like beating down the meta players. Like, no, stop it, don't you dare jump there, no, don't use that gun, no. And I think one of the I think the outcome of the recoil like changes, I should say, this wipe was because there was sort of a meta, or maybe an ask from the players to, hey, change the recoil. We want, the recoil be more punishing. And I don't really know. I'm not sure if what has happened this wipe has been like the best thing in the world, because it's still kind of like shown the issues. Like, it's almost like magnified the issues with the recoil system, specifically the auto recoil control, the convergent stat, because that's kind of I won't rehash what I said, but that's kind of my analysis, is that anything that has like a lot of mods you can put on to reduce recoil and has a decent auto recoil control stat is going to be good no matter what. If it's single fire, it's full auto, if it's 600 RPM, 1000 RPM, it's going to be good. So I don't want, my fear is that if this becomes, you know, super prevalent, super everyday information, that BSG will have knee jerk reaction and just, you know, okay, we need to fix this quick. Everyone's only using these 3 guns, and then they just, change some numbers, and it's just I don't know what that outcome will be, and I'm kind of like fearful that it won't be a good outcome. Because I'm not really sure how I feel about the meta this swipe, as far as like the guns that are being used. Like, I like that single fire is more relevant, but is it really single fire, or is it just spamming mouse 1 as fast as possible? Like, I don't know. That's kind of where I'm a little torn. Um,
I think
so
I don't know. I think it's feeling okay. I mean, the only point that I would have to make about this, the whole recoil system, is that you look at something like the M4, where it is usable, right? But it has taken a massive
yeah,
hit
yeah.
in terms of the things that it can do. And I think that for the most part, I think that it's been a good thing. I'm 80/20. I think
Hmm.
for semi-auto, it's been a good change. For most weapons, it's been a good change. Some of these discrepancies between the different guns, like the Scar versus the M4, is a bit weird, but that's because I think it is opened up and it's shown how you have to deal with some of these weapons in the framework of the stats that they have available to them. Because, in my opinion, the weapons with the greatest flexibility in terms of modding are the ones that are potentially the most problematic. And the mutant falls into this category, as does the M4. And but the mutant hasn't been hit with any crazy changes really, whereas the
Recently.
M4 has been dramatic. Well, because the mutant already has these good stats, whereas the M4 has ordinary stats and has just been destroyed with the overall recoil change. But that's partly a symptom, I think, of the fact that the M4 can get down to such a low recoil. It's so bad to begin with, and it can get so low with the mods. It's symptomatic of the additive recoil approach not being very good. The difference
Yeah, I
between
get what you're saying.
a stock M4 and a meta M4 needs to be tighter, because then you could bring the whole M4 recoil down and it wouldn't feel as crazy. And I think that's the problem. Is that, well, I mean, even when you deck it all out, it doesn't actually feel that great. But the
Yeah.
problem now is that even like value M4s feel unusable on full auto
Mhm.
outside of about 20 meters, which maybe is the desired effect. Fine. But the problem with that is that you can use the Scar at 20 meters, no problem. And so
Yeah.
that's the issue there, really. And I think it's because of this discrepancy between the stock versions and, or even the very lightly modded versions and the meta versions. I think the gulf is just way too wide. And you don't see people doing minimal mods on stock guns just because it doesn't make any sense. And you can
Mhm.
still keep a sense of progression and still have people work towards goals and want to be using the meta stuff,
Yeah.
even if you made the meta stuff not as good. Even if it was just a little bit better, people would still use it for a small advantage.
Yeah.
Whereas right now, I just think it's too much. Just
Yeah.
think it's way too much. That difference. The fact is, what's the M4's recoil? It's about 85, I think, to start with, or 88. I think it might be 88 to begin with, and then it can get down to 28, I
28,
believe.
yeah. Yeah.
And if that gulf wasn't so wide, then I just think it would feel. I think it would feel better, because right now you've had to make the whole thing feel awful, really, at all recoils, to try to balance the guns out. But I don't know. I'm not really sure where I'm going with this, but it's just
No,
like
I get you, man.
I just think the additive thing really causes problems.
Yeah.
Um, and every patch, every time we get new attachments or whatever, there does seem to be a new one which takes off another percent and another percent and another
Yeah.
percent, and you can really get to some very low levels of recoil. Whereas, yeah, if it was more of a sliding scale at diminishing returns, so the more mods you
Right.
add, you as
Yeah.
we said before when we've discussed this, you have mods that give a lot more to begin with, but then the base recoil is decreased to start with, and then those mods stack on each other in a diminishing way, as opposed to, at the moment, it's a non-diminishing way, but it feels like actually it feels more than that, because
How far you
they
can
effectively
go.
have they have more effect when they get when it get as it gets lower. As you can see from the zero recoil ADAR, you wouldn't be able to get to zero recoil if the system wasn't like this. So it's only when that bug was introduced and you could attach so normally say you can attach 5 recoil reducing mods of some kind. Well, the bug appeared, and you could have 2 stocks. Now you can have 6 recoil reducing attachments. Well, if you could get down to 28 or something, and then you add another stock on, well, now it goes into the negative, because it's just an addition of the number of points. Whereas if it was a multiplication, it would still be very, very low if that bug appeared, but it would, you'd go down to 10 or something, or
Yeah, yeah.
13, right? Because it would multiply incrementally based on
Right.
the combination of the mods you had, rather than additively. I do think it would be better. I really do think it would be a better
Absolutely.
system. It would close
I
the gap between the stock guns, because like a stock M4 isn't horrible IRL, and a stock AK-74M isn't horrible IRL with its default compensator. And I've always argued that, well, it's a gaming mechanic, because you need progression in the game. Otherwise, if
sure. Sure.
the stock weapons work like they do in real life, then there'd be no point getting any of the other guns, or you would only be able to find terrible weapons, really old and terrible weapons that were bad, and the stock M4 would be some holy grail that you would never see, and when you found it, and it would be really great. That's the only way that you'd really balance it. But this is more of a fine tuning tweak, I think, where you just you're changing the sort of the slope of the recoil
Yeah.
gradient, and to try and close the gap up a little bit. And it would also help new players too.
That's a
So you'd
big
still
one.
keep the recoil, yeah, you'd still keep the recoil that you have, but M4 wouldn't be semi-auto only at the beginning of the game, because at the beginning it really, I mean, it's semi-auto only anyway now for the most part,
Yeah.
and you wouldn't end up with, well, at 88 recoil, you can't full auto really, unless you are like literally pressed up into someone's face. You just can't. You actually just can't. It's wild. The recoil is crazy.
Yeah. I think I 100% agree with the, having it diminishing returns would just be great for new players. It's sort of like makes the gap, in my opinion, better between high level, unlock everything, all the meta parts versus like, fresh out of the box stock AK. I like that. Yeah, it still makes progression meaningful, all those things. I think you said something really important about the M4 and how it has like that sort of like sliding scale, I guess you could say, with those mods. And because what they did essentially with this wipe, they essentially added 20 recoil to every gun. And, as I was saying earlier, I don't, I'm not really sure how I feel about the meta because the single fire guns are basically full auto, just really low rate of fire, um, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think that those single fire guns were always good, but because everything got increased by 20%, this or not 20%, 20 points in vertical recoil, essentially a 28 vertical recoil M4 is 48 or 49, I guess, because it's like 21.6. Anyways, it's essentially as low as you can go. Whereas, like, yeah, the SR25, maybe it's like, I don't know, let's say it's like 86 or something, but the the rate of fire sort of like works in its favor where it's not that insane, like you can take a single fire low recoil M4 and like single tap pretty fast, and it's like it does sort of get pretty decent accuracy. It has a little bit of a kick, and that's because of the some of the angles and whatnot. But I don't know. I think that that's kind of my fear is that what they did, their solution to the problem was let's just raise everything up. So like everything got slid up, and it's like all of a sudden M4 kind of trash. Um, single fire DMRs, they got slid up, but they were already good to begin with. It was just that the M4 was so much better because the full auto, was way better. Now it's like, yeah, so it's just like I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's my fear in
Yeah.
spreading this is I don't want this to become like super meta because like as I said, I think the meta guns are just super obvious looking at this spreadsheet. And next patch if this thing gets updated and is like everywhere available, BSG is going to be like knee jerk reaction changing things, and I'm just kind of fearful that I don't know, maybe it'd be fun, but to play with the new changes they did. But I'm just kind of fearful that we're gonna get like an even worse version of the recoil system, and they're gonna be like, "Yep, we fixed the problem." So that's my fear. But
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like people kind of already know anyway, just from playing around with it and feeling
sure.
it out. Well, what I find kind of interesting because clearly I used the M4 on Semi a lot because I did the video about it and I was
Mhm.
playing a bunch of raids and it worked really well. And I do think for me personally, the most interesting thing about the semi-auto thing is not just about taking one individual shot because technically speaking, taking 3 shots in semi at a relatively slow rate of fire.
Mhm.
Or well, okay, let me put this differently. Taking 3 shots in semi-auto as fast as you physically can, and I think the semi-auto fire rate is capped to
600
650 or
or
600. Yeah,
650, maybe one of the two.
something around there. Anyway, I think
Yeah.
maybe it's 600. Firing as fast as you can with those first 3 shots is like the full auto problem. But the thing is
Yes.
that if you're and it's not very good. No, the first couple of shots are not it's not very good, even if you're firing on semi. But the thing about firing on semi is that beforehand, as you said, the M4s and the HKs were great because everything could get to super low recoil. And so the ones with the highest fire rate ended up being the best because you just spray someone with bullets until they die. Or the ones that have got a lot of damage, alternatively, one or the other. Something you can get on target a lot, otherwise do a lot of damage with, and end up getting a lot of DPS accurately. Whereas now, full auto is kind of tough. So semi works because you don't have to fire so quickly that the convergence becomes a problem. You can fire 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and you can effectively set your own RPM.
Mhm.
And at some point, a lower RPM becomes a benefit, as we've seen with the UMP. Previously, when the UMP was added, it was awful and everyone hated it, and everyone loved the Vector and these other guns. In this patch, the UMP is better. The higher that you make the recoil, the lower RPM ends up getting better and better and better and better. And so that's kind of why some of these full auto guns have had their effectiveness cut a lot, because the RPM is set and you can't do anything about it. And so the HK and the M4, it's their own worst enemy, because the recoil actually works. The RPM works against them. But when you're using them on semi, you can then set your rate of fire, and it's kind of surprising using it on semi for so long and feeling how good it actually feels. And I'm sure lots of people said to me, the Scar will feel also as good, and why not just use an ADAR and all this stuff? And that's totally valid, and that makes sense. But after using these weapons on semi for so long, and then going back to using full auto on the M4, it actually surprised me a little bit how fast it fires, and how not fast you have to fire in semi to be very, very effective. You can fire at 300, 400 RPM, but be very accurate and kill people really quickly. So I feel like you don't necessarily need to be shooting, with omega finger speed on your mouse. It doesn't need to be like that, and that's not the way that I was firing it. I'm sure I was firing at half the RPM most of the time, like 400 RPM or something, or maybe 350 even. At which point you're getting into that territory where, well, the UMP is great at 600, and is 650 is the UMP or 600? I forget.
600, I think.
And so you're firing even lower than that. So almost every single shot is going on target, because you're almost circumventing the convergence and the recoil and all this stuff, because each shot's going on target, and you can set your own RPM based on when the crosshair comes back down. And so that ends up why it feels so good, is because full auto is not really a contender. Because previous people said semi-auto was bad before, and it full auto, I think, yeah, as you said, full auto was so good previously
Mhm.
that it made semi-auto not feel as effective. But plenty of people used M61 in SR25s and stuff
Yeah.
before, and there was a choice there really between, are you fighting close quarters inside buildings where you want to be pre-firing and stuff? Like full auto is just better for that. But a lot of people using 4 times is, or 3 times is, even 6 times is, using weapons on semi, shooting across labs with MDRs with voodoos on. There's lots of that kind of happened before, and so I don't think it's necessarily fair to say. I think there was sort of two different ways of playing depending on where you were going, and
Sure,
people like
sure.
guns that did both because it made sense. Whereas now, yeah, full autos. I don't think semi's really changed, and full autos just disappeared, and now semi just looks so good in comparison as a alternative. I don't know. I think it feels a lot more balanced to me. I just wish that some of the discrepancies could be ironed out a little bit, but otherwise, 80% of it, I'm happy with. I think it's okay. I do actually think it's okay. I do.
The interesting, if you were saying like convergence and how it correlates or is related, there's a relationship between convergence and rate of fire, where, as you were saying, you shoot slow enough, you're not really adding or multiplying that convergence factor. You're sort of like shooting, it resets, there's no more auto recoil control. You shoot, you get recoil, convergence kicks in. If you shoot fast enough, you sort of have this compounding effect where, yes, the recoil starts feeling less because the convergence is being multiplied. It's so heavily upon itself. The vectors, the 45 vector is a full auto gun for all intents and purposes, right? It has a really high rate of fire, but the convergence stat is like a 3.4, which is almost 3 times like the M4. And the rate of fire is like, God, I don't,
45 vectors 1100,
yeah, the M4 is like 800.
800
So it's like 30% faster ish. I don't know. I can't do quick
ish.
math.
Yeah.
But the convergence is almost what, twice as much, I want to say, maybe even more. And that thing is like Omega laser beam, but it's an interesting thing because it goes up and it goes down, and then it starts going, it starts freaking out like side to side really aggressively. So I don't know. I don't know where I was going with that, but yeah, the whole thing is, yeah, it's a crazy, crazy, crazy world. All this hidden stats and mechanics and everything. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely is. It's one of those things. There was one other thing that I wanted to say, which you reminded me of when you mentioned then. It was there was a tip that somebody said to me, I think it was actually in our Discord actually,
Mm-hmm.
about full auto and whether I tried this. And I haven't really put much thought into it too much, but it came back to my mind now, which was about a way to help with the initial kick of various weapons. And maybe this makes more sense in the context of potentially what we now know about the way that these things work, which was the one or two taps on semi and then hold down for full auto,
Yes.
because you're kind of getting ahead of you're letting the convergence
Build
come
up.
in from the first two
Mm-hmm.
without taking all of the recoil, and then you go full auto. So you go tap tap and then full auto. So you're benefiting from 2 rounds worth of convergence when you start your full auto, so you don't get the big peak at the
Yeah.
top,
Yeah.
which is sort of analogous to the low recoil ammo, putting like 2 or 3 of them in the top of a mag. It's sort of an analogous thing to that, but more practical, because you can do it with
With
any
any,
weapon. You can do it
yeah.
with at any time. You don't need to do funny things, stacking your magazines with different ammo types and potentially putting awful rounds in the top, and if you need to take long range shot, and these things are subsonic and all this stuff. So I don't know, maybe there's something in that I need to test. I haven't seen that many people talking about it. A few people have mentioned it here and there about taking these, you go like 1-2 and then full auto,
Mm-hmm.
and it stops the thing of, if you're looking down attack 30 and you full auto with the M4, the whole thing goes black and then it comes back
Right.
again. If you go tap tap full auto, you get the jump, but and then full auto happens, and it tries, but then it comes back down again, and you don't end up just losing complete sight picture like you do if you spray the thing that range. So maybe there's something to that too. It's interesting. I don't know.
I think,
We've put have we talked enough about
yeah, I was
recoil?
just gonna say my final conclusion to wrap it all up is convergence is
King?
the enemy, in my opinion. Camera recoil, that was a complete, misnomer, or yeah, that was not
Red
the
herring or
enemy.
something?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So
Mm,
okay,
interesting.
what we got next,
What
Giga?
next? What next? Rubles versus US dollars in game. I'm not
Oh
going to talk
yeah.
about anything to do with this in reality.
Okay.
But rubles versus dollars in game are changing. The values are changing. Dollars are more expensive in ruble terms in
Mm-hmm.
game than they were before. This is kind of interesting. So they've been rubles. Well, the ruble to dollar rate in Tarkov was like 126 for the longest time, I think. And it used to be lower than that, I believe, in the past. I think it was lower, but it has slowly moved up. I don't actually know whether this is an automatic thing or whether
Yeah, I was wondering.
BSG change it directly themselves, but that went from 126 to 135 or something, and I think now it's sitting at 147, something along those lines. So it's pretty expensive. So anybody
Yeah.
who's sat on a bunch of dollars is doing better for themselves
Mm-hmm.
in some sense. You would think anyway. You would think. But it's actually a little bit weird. I saw a
Huh.
post from, I think it was Axel, who put something up on Twitter, in that basically what he was proposing, and I think this is true actually, because you do see when, and I noticed this in my videos, when that rate moves around, the dollar prices of the items also move around, because I've done it before where I've gone on the fleet, I've written a script out, and I've got all the prices in my head, da 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 da, and I don't bother taking the screenshots, and then I come back later, record the script, and then when I'm editing, sometimes I'll take the screenshots then, and I'm like, damn, all the prices are different, and it's kind of annoying. And it was usually only by $1 or two, so it didn't really make that much difference. I said, roughly, and normally I now say approximately this, approximately that, because the small changes doesn't matter. But he pointed out that M61, for example, has gone from $19 to $15 because of this change. And this is because, basically, so it seems, all of the ammo and all the equipment and all that stuff in the
Oh.
background is all listed in rubles, really. And so when the exchange rate changes in Tarkov, all of the dollar prices actually go down when the ruble gets weaker in Tarkov, which is kind of
What?
weird. So
Yeah.
so people are thinking, well, I'm in the money for having stacked up these dollars, and I guess they are, because they bought the dollars before,
Mm-hmm.
when the
It
rate
was,
was not as when the rate was uh, was better for you, I suppose. But for anybody else, practically speaking, it actually didn't make any difference. So you're in the
yeah.
same position as you were before. Like, you haven't lost out.
Mm-hmm.
because the dollar prices are now lower. So you can't buy as many dollars, but the dollar prices are lower to the same extent. So it practically doesn't make any difference to you, I believe.
Unless you're buying from players that are selling stuff for dollars, then you're
That's
technically
true.
losing out.
That's true.
Assuming,
Now,
yeah. Go ahead.
yeah, sorry, assuming what?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say that brings up another interesting question as to what the flea market
Mm-hmm.
rate is, because we've talked before about this. I mean, it's a bug really that the flea market doesn't necessarily use the same exchange rate as Skier and Peacekeeper for euros and dollars. And so you can list items in euros and dollars on the flea market. And previously, you could list them at a price that if you directly converted it using the traders, it would be higher in rubles, but it comes up lower on the flea because the flea seems to not be linked in the same way to the trader value. It's some other value, which is, I presume, static and not the same. So whether that is still the same again, and you can now, I haven't really thought in my head which way that would have gone. But we're saying that things
No
are more
clue.
expensive. Yes, you get more USD, and yeah, I'm not sure. I'd need to think about it a bit more. I'm not going to think about it on the fly. So whether you can list items now that are even a bigger gulf. So say it was 50K in rubles, and you could list stuff up to 55,000 in dollars and have it come before the 50K stuff on the flea. Or maybe now it's 65 or 70. I'm not sure. Or whether it's gone the other way. I can't really work out in my head at the time. But that's an interesting one. I need to have a go and look at that. And you just reminded me that that actually existed as a bug, because yeah, I'm sure if that's the thing, people are definitely gonna be taking advantage of it. They always do. They always do. So, but yeah, I thought that was intriguing because you would imagine that the dollar prices of these items really should just be fixed in their local currency. It should be fixed in dollars. It shouldn't be rubles in the background and then changing with the rate. So there's a bit of a economy flaw there that only really becomes obvious
Mm-hmm.
when the currency rates start moving around quite a bit, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. The whole, honestly, how they have that set up and all the inconsistencies is really interesting. Like I wonder if like they have to manually set the currency for each, like the flea market, the trader, and then like the not how many rubles to get it, the dollar or whatever the other currency you're trying to get, and then how many rubles is re- represented in the currency for the item that the trader's selling. Like it's all, man, it's all weird how it's all disconnected but also connected in some way. Like, love to see the back
Yes,
end behind the curtain of that one.
exactly. Exactly. It's another one of those things where you'd hope that somewhere they've got a database which says,
Yeah.
here's the rate, and then that rate gets
Right.
referenced everywhere in the code, but
Yes.
that's clearly not the case
Yeah. Maybe it
for
is
one
the
reason or another.
case, but maybe I don't know. Maybe who knows? Who knows?
I find it hard to believe that it's intentional that you can game the flea market like that, but maybe it is. Maybe it's
Who
one of those
knows?
things that if you notice and you know, then you can fiddle around with it. If you understand the way the system works, you've done your research or whatever. I just feel I find it difficult to believe that that is intended. I think it's just a fixed value in the flea somewhere. There's some hard coded number for the dollars and euro amounts.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it must be that. But that's probably the last thing that they really need to work on. It doesn't really matter at this point. That's one of those things that really only matters for after release, in my opinion, to get fixed, because that's sort of balancing and economy changes and
Yeah.
stuff, which I think can wait. It's not critical. We want to get
Yeah.
the other features out first and get the game released.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um.
Yeah.
So I also got 3 flea slots when before I was
Ah,
having massive issues, and my God, is it like night and day, dude? Because it's actually, I actually am really disliking slots limits because going from 2 to 3 is like massive for me because not only can I just actually do stuff, right?
mm,
Like 2 slots, you try to sell, maybe you get through like 5 items and you're listing the lowest possible, right? But sometimes you just get other people also doing that. So sometimes you just get
Yeah.
unlucky and you get massively undercut, right? And you can't do anything. You just have to go in a raid. And then what happens when you leave the raid and you try to put stuff in your stash? You can't because your stash was full. And it's like it's just not a fun process, you know.
Yeah.
Now that I have 3, I almost I haven't used it a lot, but I didn't really have that issue. But what I did notice is I could actually list high, right?
Mm.
Because I can afford to have my stuff not sell because I'm actually higher up in the list and it will sell, but I have more slots to play with. So I can make more money because I have 3 slots in some ways. I can afford to do that. And I don't really like that because it took me 150 billion rubles of selling shit to get there. And now I can make more money. Like I don't like it's a nice progression thing, but here's the other way I looked at it is, you know, going from 3 to 2, that effectively is just like how do I say this? It's just like a time gate thing. I don't know. It's just like once you get locked up, they're basically saying go, you know, you can't do anything. Go play a raid or just sit there and wait. And that and that's like and this is me sort of in assuming BSU's goal was to slow down money. But you're not really slowing down like you are slowing down money, but you're not really slowing down money. You're just slowing down how fast you can like get it. Like for example, okay, let's say I have a stash full of wires, like it's just all wires.
Yeah.
Okay, actually that's a bad example. Okay, let's say I have a stash full of wires and motors, okay, and GM counters. This is all interchangeably because, anyways, but I only have 2 slots. So I list all my wires, list all my motors. I get, you know, 100,000 rubles. Okay. But I have to wait until all that sells before I can get the other 50,000 from the GM counters because I can't list those. Whereas I have 3 slots, I still get the same amount, 150,000, but I get it sooner than later. Like but the actual amount is the same in both scenarios. It's just one takes longer to get because you have less slots. Does this make sense so far?
It does, but I think there's an extra element to this as well, which is the
Okay.
fact that with 2 slots, it's more annoying and actually incentivizes more people just to sell to the traders. You end up getting less
Even
money if you
less.
especially if you have lots of myriad items. I know when
Yeah.
I was doing, and I'll mention about this in a minute, but when I was pushing towards ScavKarma and I was doing lots of factory run throughs just because I didn't have to think about it too much and I was just doing it while I was doing other stuff, I would end up coming out of raid with all sorts of random junk, and lots of the stuff now I just sell straight to the traders. Even selling to the traders, like it's one of those things when at this point, and now that I've ended up not, I've finished the hideout and it's completed. At this point now, I'm really de-incentivized for money in an extreme way, and I know how all my wipes end, which is with millions of rubles.
Yeah.
So now, even selling to the, even going sell to mechanic. Oh no, that's broken. So I can't. I need to sell to fence. Go to Ragman, sell the stuff. Go to therapist, sell the things. Go to Jaeger, sell the knife. Go to fence, sell everything else. Even that has started to become annoying. And so only the really high value items that are dislocated quite a lot from the trader prices I'm actually bothering to put up. The rest of it, all the rigs and all the other stuff are just going Ragman,
Yeah, for
mechanic,
sure.
fence, because it just takes so long. And I think that's part of it. It's like incentivizing people to sell to the traders rather than on the flea. And then you end up with less money in general, because as you rightly say, if you had infinite slots, you could just kind of put everything up and then it wouldn't, it's super easy. I just wish that, I don't actually mind it being like this, but I just wish that the progression was way quicker, like way quicker. I think that you should get 3 slots at 5 rep or something. I don't see why it's so high. It sort of does what they wanted, but I feel like other things in this patch did. I think they just did everything in this patch. They tried to do everything. We've said about this before. They said, right, we're gonna lock this, we're gonna diminish this, and we're gonna change the flea, we're gonna block this, and we're gonna do that and do the other. And a lot of these things kind of had similar effects in some ways. And some of them, like the flea change, I think is unnecessary. I don't think having 3 slots to start with even, or unlock it early or whatever, I don't think it changes materially the way that the game plays or the way that the money sinks work or incentivizing people to sell to the traders. Do I think it's actually important for the game and the progression? No, I don't. So that's where I don't think it necessarily achieves the goals because it's just a pain without
R-
really doing anything.
You're saying the significant impact isn't, it's like a, a drop in the bucket, essentially.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And
Yeah,
they've dematerialized money anyway. So I
right.
guess you
A
can still buy the
bit.
crafting materials to buy the meta stuff, but yeah, it's more about leveling
Yeah.
really and about XP. And there was an interesting post I think somebody put up about how handing in labs cards for a weekly or something, I
Mm-hmm.
think. And there was a interesting bifurcation in what people, or was it, no, it was a daily, and there was an interesting bifurcation in the way that people's comments were, because I think it was 4,500 XP, but you had to hand in 2 labs cards or something, and you got, I can't remember, but some junk that wasn't really worth anything. The stuff was probably worth about 70k.
Mm-hmm.
And the post was of the form, look at this quest, it's not worth it. And half the people were like, yeah, no, I'm going to be keeping them cards. And the other half of the people were like, any ability to buy XP, done. At any
Yeah.
price,
Yeah.
any price. And
Yeah.
I was more on that side of it, which is
Right.
that you can't buy XP. There's nothing else that you can do.
Mm-hmm.
I can make as much money as I like,
Yeah.
but
Yep.
XP is hard to come by. XP is the currency of Tarkov
Yeah.
now, really. And yeah, even if it's a small number, even if it's 4,500 XP or something, that's a moderate rate. That probably, in time terms, it probably takes you 15, 20 minutes if you're having a good raid and you
Mm-hmm.
kill a couple of scabs and loot some stuff, whatever. It's probably 20 minutes in raid, and it's potentially even a 30, 35-minute raid, depending on what happens, where you go, what you get, whether you loot anything, whether there's anyone there, whether you find any scabs or not. So for that, for me, it's definitely worthwhile because I just feel that, yeah, you can always make that money. And I think in that sense, I thought that was interesting because there's other things that are important now. And along the same lines, I'm now in crafting stuff. I'm actually very close as well to 3 slots myself. I think I'm at 28,
Oh yeah, you're close.
but I slowed down a lot because I decided that I wanted to be doing moonshine and things to get the ophthalmoscope, to get the tank battery, to get loads of these other things. And now that I've finished with that, I actually accelerated up quite quickly and then changed over once I wasn't getting them when I was looking for them on Woods. But I changed over to get these items, but that slowed down my flea market progression quite a lot. And so I've actually switched back to selling moonshine and that kind of thing on the
Mm-hmm.
flea. And I'm trying to craft now to craft myself the highest value item that I can find to list on the flea because my flea rep is actually the thing that I'm trying to level now, not the money. So I don't it needs to be profitable, but I don't really care if it's the most profitable craft because I don't need the cash. What I do want is I want flea market reputation. So
Yeah.
it's interesting actually how now my attention is turned towards experience and things like flea market rep and scav karma and stuff like this rather than money. Money is not really, if I can buy any of those other things with money, then usually I will make that choice and I will do that because that's sort of what I'm saying in the hideout with the crafting. I'm saying I could craft the most expensive and most valuable item, but I'm choosing to pay that
Yeah.
premium to craft a different item because it's a higher value. Or
Right.
when I was doing moonshine runs after I'd finished with my stuff, I was getting a lot of items like pestily masks and some various weapons that I couldn't sell, helmets that I couldn't sell, stuff that I just had to either turn over on the traders. And it was making decent money, and sometimes you'd get a power filter or whatever. But a lot of the items I was just turning over through the traders or keeping them and using them because they were high value items that I couldn't dump on the flea. And I think overall, the total value of items that I ended up selling on the flea market ended up being less than what it was for the moonshine. Also, you end up with like 7 different items, which for reasons we talked about before, ends up being a real pain, which is why I ended up selling it to the traders in the first place, because I don't want to sit there and go trying to sell this and that and trying to sell a HK for 46,000 rubles when mechanic will buy it for 43 or something. It's just, I just couldn't really be bothered. So I want high quantities of high value items that I can sell all together. So I want to sell 5 moonshines all at once. So I'm happy to try and craft those to sell them all in one go to get as much flea
Right.
market rep as I can. And I can buy in the sugars and I can buy all of these these
Mhm.
items that go into it to make this high value item, and it ends up being a high ticket thing that you can then put on the fleet, which then gives you the most flea rep. Long story short, money doesn't matter.
That's like money doesn't matter. Mic drop. God, this guy's such a badass. No, yeah, dude. So I want to rewind back a little bit,
Okay. I said a
and
lot. I said a lot of stuff. I went on a bit of
no, you're
one of them.
good. You're good. The so that's an interesting point you made about selling to the traders is something to weigh because you choose convenience over money, I guess.
Mhm. Yeah, pretty much.
Which is which I think is a fair point, and that sort of plays into that idea of slowing down ruble you know accumulating wealth in the game.
Yeah.
So I didn't really think about that. So it's yeah, I don't know. I have to think about that more, but good point there. Um, yeah, about buying EXP, dude. 100%. Me this wipe, absolutely, dude. It doesn't matter what. Like, well, almost doesn't matter what, but there's a few things. If you say I need
Red
three,
card for 3,000
yeah,
XP.
yeah, then it's like, well, okay. But yeah, 100% because the flea market bans, and it's such a this is a whole nother topic. I don't. Yeah, we won't get into today, but you know, this idea of like you can't buy these things with money. I don't know how I feel about that because it's like your BSG is basically saying that work you did is not accepted. We need you have to do some other type of work for us to to get that item you want, which is interesting, and I'm not sure how I feel about it. And then yeah, I guess that's kind of it. That's kind of it. I probably have some more stuff, but it's hard. I should like write it down as you're talking, but
Yeah, I said too many things too quickly. Do you know what the next what is for
I
flea market
forget.
reputation? Do you even
I think
know?
it's 80. Airwing said he's close to. I'm just like, oh my god, I
Oh
can't
my
believe
god,
that. I know it's insane. Insane.
Ellie's
How's
a beast. Hideout
how is Max Scav Karma with the Intel Center? Well, how long is it?
for the scav
Reset.
turnaround or something.
Yeah, turnaround.
It's like I can't really remember, but it's between 5.5 minutes and 6 minutes, something like that. It's
Okay.
really quick. It's really quite quick. By the time that you've sold your stuff,
Yeah.
sifted through your stuff and sold a few things, there's usually only 3 minutes or 3.5 minutes left on it. So you can sell your stuff, go get a drink, come back, and bam, you're ready again.
Yeah.
You're ready to play another scav. The only thing that I would say about Scav Karma 6, or I should say 6 fence rep in
Mm-hmm.
particular, to get max Scav Karma and unlock Fence's magical level 4, is that it absolutely sucks.
That bad, huh?
It's really awful. It's actually really awful. And some people have said that they've got some good stuff off there. And I've tried to look a few times and see if there's anything of any value. And I'm finding it very difficult to really find any redeeming value whatsoever. There are a few specific situations for things that are quite good, but the value of them is so low, it's almost not worth looking. So one of my favorite trades in the game, and I think I talked about this every podcast for the last 4 podcasts or something, is the ANA M2 rig with the 3 round glasses
Oh
and
yeah, and the visor.
the 3 visors and the visors with the chainlets. And the thing about that is that people sell the round glasses to Fence, and if you buy them from Fence, they're about 3K. And
Oh,
sometimes you can find chainlets are really cheap anyway. But anyway,
right.
if you slowly buy round glasses from Fence at 3,000, which is 9K, and then you buy chainlets at, let's say, 5, sometimes they're 4.5K, or let's just say 5K for argument's sake. So that's 15K for chainlets, and then 9K for the glasses in total. So you can basically buy one of those rigs for 24,000 rubles, which is, it's effectively free. Really, it's so cheap. You can
Yeah.
actually probably make a profit selling it back to Ragman,
Yeah.
I think, if you did it that way.
Now
The
is
other,
that sorry to interrupt real quick. Is that
yeah.
without Max Karma? That's just
No,
regular fence?
no, that's I'm not sure. I'm specifically looking in the the level 4 tab. So I haven't actually checked to see whether those appear. I think they're more expensive in the other tab. I'm not actually. I need to check that if those items can appear in both. I don't know. I've been looking exclusive. I didn't think about that. I've been looking exclusively in the level 4 tab to see what appears in there.
Because remind me
The,
again, I'm sorry, what does level 4 even do?
it opens up another tab like a level like with the trader levels.
Right.
So Fence has two tabs. He has his regular one, the level 1 version,
Right.
which everybody gets, and then he has a Trader 4 tab. So he has none
Right.
of the tabs in between, but he just has a Trader 4 tab, which is a special tab, which is supposed to be items that people didn't ensure that got dropped in raid by PMCs, in theory. But I don't know whether it's just kind of faked or something. I'm not sure because all the items have the Find in Raid sticker on them
Mm-hmm.
in Fens, which they do on the flea as well. You know, if you go on the flea and you look at an item, it has the Find and Raid tag on it because it still is Find and Raid because the person's put it up and it hasn't been sold yet. Well, all the Fences items also have Find and Raid. Maybe that's just a symptom of the fact that it comes through some weird mechanism or whatever. But
Okay.
there does seem to be something to it. If I look really early in European hours, there's almost nothing on Fence, and later on there is more on him. So maybe there is something to that. I don't know, but it's weird. But you only get garbage stuff. I thought maybe you could find some good ammunition or whatever. I've never seen any pieces of good ammunition so far on him.
To get ammo also?
Anything? There's ammo too, yeah, but it's
Oh,
like
okay. So
M856, M855, PS rounds, T rounds for 9 mil. Like it's this kind of stuff.
okay.
So there's no way you'd ever bother buying these things. Then the weapons are all too expensive. Most of them seem to be terrible durability, which is weird because that's not. Well, maybe PMCs are just not ensuring the terrible weapons because they're doing cheap runs. I'm not sure, but and then all the gear. The problem with the gear is that we all know the issues with the trader system. That the traders sell all the gear for too much. So if you look at how much ULACs
Right.
are or any of these other things from the traders, usually they're way cheaper from the fleet. Like you've probably never bought a ULAC from Peacekeeper,
Right.
probably not ever. But because it's all based on those values, the ULACs on Fence are about the same value as the player ULACs on the fleet, but probably about 10k more. So you end up not buying any of those from him because it's not cheaper. The only places where it's valuable is certain crafting ingredients that are really cheap anyway. Sometimes you can get those quite cheaply. So sometimes you can find scab vests on Fence, which if you want to craft into ripstop, then that can be okay. You can find round glasses and you can find those lower half masks, which you can turn into packers through barter.
Okay.
So there's things like that. Food and drinks sometimes is cheap, but a lot of them are actually not that cheap relative to the flea market, which is a bit disappointing.
Just like
And then
really scraping the bottom of the
you got
barrel.
to like this is the thing, like there's some very specific situations where maybe you can get something good out of it, but normally it's around crafting or that kind of thing where the in-game value is low for an item, but on the
Uh-huh.
flea market the value is
It's
high for an
high.
item. And so on Fence it's very, very cheap.
Yeah.
But if you bought it on the flea market, it would be quite a lot. And that's really where the value comes. But as I said, the problem is it makes you sort of in the 5 to 10k region to
Yeah.
scour through and remember all these things. And oh yeah, this is good, and this is good, and this is good.
Right.
And you're better off just running through factory once and making 85k off your kit.
Yeah.
So it's not really worth looking because it doesn't appear anywhere else. It doesn't appear on the flea. You don't see it on the flea. That would be a redeeming feature if you got to that. Honestly, that's actually a good idea that I've just thought of. If you got to Fence level 4, Scav Karma 6 or above, Fence's items would start appearing on the flea. That would be useful because then when you're searching for other things, you'd see
You
Fence's
might see.
entries on the
Yeah.
flea market, and then you'd pick it up. Because the problem at the moment is that you have to specifically go to Fence's tab and look at the tab and sift through all the garbage, rubbish stuff on there that you're never going to buy, and 95% of it is junk.
It also sounds like if there was something good on there and it was cheaper than what you could, well, yeah, well, like, okay, here's actually an interesting example. Let's say someone brought in a slick and they didn't insure it and they died to a, Killa in the middle of nowhere on the interchange. God, I just got so many bad memories of Killa killing me on the interchange. Anyways, you can't buy the slick on the flea market. You can only buy it Ragman level 4, level 42, and you have to barter for it. So
Mhm.
let's just say Fence was selling it, and let's just say it was brand new condition, and let's also say it was cheaper than the barter. It's interesting because you don't have to be level 4, and it's a way to get the armor, but it suffers from a problem that all the traders suffer from, and that's you gotta you if you wanna get it, you may have to camp the trader because if other people are also have the same mentality, they probably are also camping the trader to see what's good. So every time he resets, they're gonna go check it if something's good there. Huh, that's an interesting
The
one.
only thing about Fence that's different there, though, is that at least it's not camping the trader on reset because Fence refreshes continuously.
Does
It
he?
doesn't have a regular reset cycle in the same sense. So you can refresh him every 30 seconds or something, and more items appear, some items disappear. He actually has a different
I
mechanism.
think you're right, yeah. For some reason, I recall maybe it's I don't know if you noticed this, but the traders, they now say restocked. Like, if you
Yes.
do something and then come back and I notice sometimes Fence will say restocked, and I'm not sure if he has a
Hmm.
really big timer or not, but I'm pretty
I'm not sure
sure.
what happens when the Fence timer runs down. I don't
Yeah,
actually
I don't
know.
know. That's a weird one.
I'm not really sure. Yeah, it's strange. So yeah, Scav Karma worth it for almost everything except for the Fence thing, actually. So low scav run timer is great. Low scav box
Yeah,
time is great.
better scav
Fence
gear.
himself, yeah, better scav gear is great. Fence level 4 tab, not great. In fact, quite poo-poo in many ways.
The other thing I'll say to that is playing with my group of buddies from back in the day, reunite with them. Um, mostly this wipe I've not insured, but playing with them,
Mhm.
even playing with them, I still don't insure, and I really should because if we're a
Oh,
five
yeah.
man, it just makes it's like a no brainer to insure because there's a good chance someone in our group is gonna be able to clutch it up. You know what I mean? It's just like, and then you ditch everyone's gear and they're like, it's so funny. One of my friends, his stash is like complete, like it makes you want to puke. There's stuff everywhere. There's like guns, ammo, knives, ammo cases inside rigs, inside backpacks, inside cases. Like it's disgusting, right? But he's like, guys, I know everything it is, blah blah blah, whatever. And then so we were looking at it, I was like, and then he goes to click on his insurance and he's got just like a thing full of insurance. I'm like, dude, you need to get rid of stuff. He's like, nah, man, you see, I got my regular stash and I got my prapper stash. You see, prapper stash. every raid I die, I just pull out from the prapper stash and I put stuff in my regular. I was like, dude, that is way too much. But the freaking yeah, insurance with groups indirectly or directly hurts Scav class 4 because I just feel like if you're playing as a group, everyone should be insurance. It just makes sense to me. Like it's just the logical thing. I mean, having it's like so super value having one guy. Let's say you're a 5 man, and then 4 of your buddies get wiped, but you kill the enemies or whatever. You get to ditch 4 people's gear sets. That's gonna like almost 95% chance come back in insurance. That is super value, dude. It's like it's
Yeah.
almost a guarantee. It's insane. So
It is pretty crazy. Someone said in chat actually, so the amount of gear that doesn't get insured or picked up means the fence should be full of good stuff because most don't insure their top tier gear. The fact that he doesn't, I call fake news, and I actually am inclined to agree. I'm
uh
inclined to agree that there's something funny going on with fence and that it's not true because I don't insure some stuff. I mean, there should be some good stuff on there,
yeah.
but it's all cack. It really is. It's all rubbish. So I don't know. It all looks like scav grade stuff, like scavvy type gear and armor or whatever. So I've never seen anything of any significant value up there. Whether it's expensive or not, I've never seen Korans, never seen slicks, never
Mm-hmm.
seen hexes, nothing like that. Nothing of any kind. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Have to look into it.
Don't know.
We should probably wrap this up. It's about that time. Did you have any
Yeah.
other things you want to mention?
Uh, no, I think that was it. I think that was it. We managed to actually touch on all the things that I'd written down. here and there. I was actually going to leave some of it, and then ended up managing to hit on all the points. So I don't know. I think we've got some stuff for next time that are bigger topics I'd like to cover. But I think for now, I think we're good. I think I'm good anyway.
Yeah,
You got any closing thoughts?
I did have one thing I'll mention quickly is as I said, I've been leveling strength, payment interchange, killing scavs, looting GPUs, running in and out 7 minutes. I went to loot Emercom, the medical Emercom unit, and went to open it, and I breached the door. I was like, what? Hit again, I breached the door. I was like, did I bring the wrong keys? I checked my keys, it says the interchange sick case. I'm like, no, that's not it. And I'm like, I was talking about it on Discord. I'm like, why can I not? Am I bugged? Is because I was thinking it was like back end error things. And like, did you use up all your keys? And he's like, you probably used up all your uses. And I was like, did I really? And I looked, and there was no Embercon. It was just gone. I was like, oh my god, I actually used 100 times, which is insane to think about.
Yeah.
So yeah, I had to go buy a new key, and it cost me 66,000. And that key absolutely paid for. I don't know what I paid for back in the thing, but that thing more than paid for. It's like it's insane.
That's crazy. There's no chance I've ever even. The only keys that I run through are factory exit keys. Those are the only ones that I go through because I play a fair amount of factory just because of the speed of the raids, and it's kind of my chill out place. Bizarrely, it's actually weird. It's like factories, the especially when you first start playing, it's like the scary, terrible place that you're going to get run over by chads. And when I'm just like, oh, I just want to play a throwaway game, then I just rock up into factory. It's kind of it's just because I think the
like
X Factor is so
factory.
close, the game's quick. It's never there's nowhere to hide. You can't hide on factory, so you're always going to be in some kind of combat. People are you know where people are. You can hear everyone because the map's so small. Yeah, it's good. That's actually less so the case now that the expansion is in. Sometimes you can be trying to find people, and then you hear a big fight going on over by med tent, and you're like, oh, they're all over there. And with the extra bit in the underground, sometimes you don't necessarily find everybody. But yeah, it's funny really, just to chill out with factory. It's just like my noob self, and when I first started playing the game, I'd be like, you what? How could you relax on that map? I'm like, well, it's not really relaxing, but it's just different. I've been using the ACP vector with AP ammo on factory a bit, just having a bit of a play around, and it's fun. It's fun. It's fun. I keep getting shot through the arm with SVDs and horrible stuff because I'm sprinting around too much, not really holding angles, and I keep getting shot by people holding angles by forklifts and all sorts of dodgy places. But it's good. It's good. I seem to be playing now this like weird combo game of I'm either sprinting at full speed or I'm completely silent, not moving. So I want all the other. Like I'm not playing either. It's like very much a binary kind of approach. It's like sprint around, and then like get to the office. I'm like, where is everyone? And then I'm silent. But then I hear a footstep, and I'm like, well, if I move now, I lose my tactical advantage. So I'll listen and just see where this guy goes. And then he comes around the corner. Now you hear him like looting a jacket, looting another jacket. I'm like, he's gonna come around in a minute. And he just like steps around and then just 1100 RPM, and the guy doesn't even know you're there. And it's like, God, dude's gonna have to, get a new pair of pants or something after that, because there's no like it would have been such a complete surprise. Like, I feel quite bad, but yeah,
Funny.
yeah.
That reminds me of one raid, this swipe. I was playing factory, and I think I had like the LZSH helmet with the visor, so my hearing wasn't as good. I was running in the bottom bit. I was just like sprinting through, and then a guy was waiting for me, like a hunter, and he hit me, and it scared me so much. I like my hand jerked and hit spacebar, and I jumped in air. He hit me again, and then I land and like managed to kill him. But I was just like, God, dude, that scared the living crap out of me, man. Which, by the way, One Peg put out a video a little bit ago about audio compression, and one of the programs or apps he featured was SoundLock, and I recently been using it, and I think it's great, man. It's just like, please, dear God, let me maintain my hearing. Like I do not need tinnitus. So I
Maybe we should talk
highly,
about it next time.
yeah,
I
for
don't know,
sure, for sure.
because I use SoundLock myself.
Yeah, cool. Have you been
I have
using it for a
done
long time,
yeah, I've been using it for
dude?
probably, God, I don't even know now. Must be 6 months, maybe longer.
I
Been using
wish
it for a long time.
Wish I've been, because even when I'm editing, sometimes I'll accidentally slide up the like plus 30 decibels. I don't mean to. It's just like, yeah, it's really so. It's actually a really amazing tool and super light. Yeah, we'll talk about it next week. And
I'll put it on the list.
Yeah. Well, we managed to get through that, dude. Devastating shit show about weapon mechanics. God, that was interesting. Yeah, guys, let me know your thoughts on this stuff. I know some people in the Discord have been poking around and asking about it and sharing opinions, and I'm curious to know what you guys think. So let us know in the comments down below. You can always send us a message, anchor.fm/ScavTalk, if you want to get featured in the show. I want to try a new feature rolling out in the near future, potentially, where we take a segment towards the end of the show and use Discord to sort of have like I guess it's called like a presentation or an audience, and then basically you can have the floor and speak and ask your question or talk about a Tarkov related topic and want to hear our thoughts and whatnot. So cool stuff. And with that, I think we're wrapping up. Giga, you got any last things?
All good. All good.
Well, guys, we'll see you next week.
Catch you later.